Geometry painted expressively. That's how Scully describes his linear, cubic forms which glow with the warmth of human touch. The artist embraces both traditional European notions of painting and the American minimalist aesthetic, be it on canvas, in prints, or in sculpture. His work features in major collections around the world, and a new selection of his paintings currently on show at the Thaddeus Ropac Gallery in Paris. He joins us in the studio to tell us more about it. Scully, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Now, this latest show is called Between Heaven and Earth, as the catalogue attests, and I wonder if you could tell us a bit about this title. Were you attempting to capture that place between two worlds?
No, I'm attempting to capture the journey between the two worlds. What I've become aware of lately, having moved out of the city, is the importance of nature, and I've become very conservationist minded. In fact, I've got now something like 4,000 trees. But what we should always remember is that we're part of nature, and we're not better than nature. We're the children of nature. So I'm trying to emphasize that not only in the title, but in the work, in the physicality of it, the sensuality of it, and it's the celebration of not only light, which is a human concept, of course, but the stuff of it.
And how it hits the natural world as well. Now, there's one piece of work in the show where the elements and colours are quite sombre. It's called Black Window, Pale Land 2020. Can you tell us about the mood of this piece and what inspired it?
Yeah, well, I did a whole series of black windows, black squares, and they naturally relate to the Black Square of Malevich, which was, of course, forced onto the artist by the cataclysm of the Russian Revolution and all the sorrow and tragedy that ensued from that. For some reason that I didn't entirely rationalize, I started thinking that way about where we were, and my windows became painted out because they seem to represent the situation we're in, or we were in. We're starting to see a little bit now of our view.
Do you mean the pandemic?
I mean the COVID, yeah. And I made these paintings in the last 6 months, black windows. They are, in fact, not just painted on, but sliced out of what is really a quasi-abstract landscape with a number of horizon lines. I'm quoting the landscape. So it's as if the flow of life, the flow of my brushstroke, the flow of my colour has been sliced out and replaced by the nihilistic black square.
Now, speaking of colours, or in this case, a lack of, your use of tone is something that's really key in the way that you modulate the energy of a piece. And I read that a trip to Morocco influenced you in terms of colour when you were quite young. Can you tell us what it was you took away from that trip to North Africa?
Oh, Morocco had an extraordinary effect on me, but I knew that it would. I went there to see about hypnotic, rhythmic geometry. Not the geometry of order, but the geometry of psychological, emotional saturation. When I went there, I connected with it immediately. I just loved all the stripes and the patterns and the way that went with the music. And in fact, I was walking around wearing a jalaba and I slept on the ground in it. I pulled the hood down, put my arms in and went to sleep on the ground. So I became part of the country.
Adopting the local Textiles. Well, indeed, interpretations of life at the edges of the desert are a new feature of a new group show here in France as part of the Africa 2020 cultural season. Hotel Sahara brings together multidisciplinary pieces at the Magasin Généraux Art Centre here in Paris. Our reporters went to find out more.
The largest sand desert in the world, the Sahara is vast yet full of cliches. And it's the job of these 10 artists in residence to reveal its true complexity, as the project's commissioner explains.
With Hotel Sahara, we wanted to question the fantasies people have about the Sahara, particularly how they think it's a completely empty space. We wanted to ground it in reality, as a place where people live and work. The desert has culture and art, and that's what's important.
The artists, filmmakers, musicians, performers and others have drawn from the sights and sounds around them to create entirely new pieces.
Who we are and what we see will definitely come across in the exhibition. It's kind of a meeting between our various different art forms.
They're all either from or have roots in countries traversed by the Sahara, but for the most part they've never experienced it so closely. Such is the case with Famacane Magassa, a young painter from Mali.
I think it's a wonderful place. For now, I haven't decided on one idea, but when I get back to my canvas, I'll figure out how to portray the desert.
A year later, Magassa is on the outskirts of Paris, where he's finishing 3 pieces inspired by his memories of the Sahara.
I was inspired by the Takamba dance, which can be found in the north of Mali. I thought it would represent the Sahara well, because the figures I painted are full of movement.
The exhibition is on until October at the Magasin Généraux Cultural Centre in Pantin.
Now, as we can see, those artists and their work have a relationship with the space. And Sean, many of your sculptures are displayed outside in dialogue with their surroundings. I'm thinking of, for example, the Chateau Lacoste in the south of France, in Germany as well. And I wanted to know, for you personally, how do you find that place, geography has influenced you and the artist you are today?
Well, I've travelled a lot. You know, I moved to Spain for a while. I love Spain, and I love its brutality, its connection to the ground, again. And, of course, I moved to Germany to confront and be informed by its history, which is tragic, its sense of redemption, and its philosophical profundity. All this feeds into my intellectual, emotional appetite. And going to China was interesting too. Its vastness and its opulent history and its austere correction by Mao Zedong. And all these places feed into what I'm trying to do in my work, which is based really on unification.
Now, indeed, beyond your artistic journey, you've spoken about your personal journey from 1940s Dublin, where you were born, to post-war London, to New York, where you became a respected, highly successful artist. That is quite a huge stretch in terms of experience and in terms of social mobility. And as a very young person, I wonder, how did you see the role of the artist, and how does it measure up to the reality that you're in today?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Yeah, when I began to be an artist, art was quite marginalized. It was a calling that was basically quite religious in its sense of mission. And one of my big examples was Van Gogh. who was actually a preacher in some form, and he identified with the very poor, marginalized people. And art itself, I thought, was marginalized. People used to say less than 1% of people are interested in art. Well, now art has become mainstream. I'm part of this, and whether I like it or not, it's going to be mainstream. Doesn't matter what I think. I remember when I was living on in a slum on the Old Kent Road in London, very poor, starving, and we had little gas lights. So I've gone from gaslight to iPhone seamlessly. It's very important to be in life and to understand that I'm actually not directing the world. In fact, nobody is. We are perhaps able to influence it ever so slightly. Like maybe my 4,000 trees now influence it ever so slightly, but they can't transform it.
Indeed. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today, Sean Scully. We're wrapping up the show with some more of Sean's work, and of course, Between Heaven and Earth is on show at the Thaddeus Ropac Gallery in Paris. Do remember you can get more arts and culture on our website and on our social media feeds too. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.